Hi everyone. So we're all in lockdown in one form or another all around the world, and one of my great teachers used the opportunity to just do some broadcasts to people and talk about what really matters. And I found that really touching because I've known him for 45 years now, and it was like we get to spend once a day um, personal time together rather than in a crowd of a couple of thousand people or more, even very large crowds, or occasionally once or twice one-on-one. But this was like a short broadcast every night that I get in the evening, and I can just spend some time with one of my sources of inspiration, one of my true heroes, someone who's really helped me in this life, who's alive. Not someone I've read about and hardly know, but someone who's touched my life really personally and made a real difference because he showed me what to do, guided me, and I did the work. And that's what a real hero is. And so I was looking at what could I do that would help inspire people in the midst of all these changes that are going on globally. And I've been sitting on a novel that I wrote in 2013, 2014. And it amazes me still that I wrote this. And it comes out of all the work I've done in my life, somehow all put together without planning in a period of 8 or 9 months when I just had solitude. I was overlooking the Brisbane River, sitting in the library 5 or 6 days a week, and just had 4 to 6 hours just to write. And I'd like to share a chapter of this with you now. And if people like it, further chapters, there's 45 chapters. And I'm happy to share this with you because it so inspires me. It draws together so many things that mean something. The legend of Arthur and Merlin and Guinevere and Camelot. All the metaphysical things that I've learned, all the practical applications of that I've put together in my life. And so, past, present, future. And I'd like to read that because it inspires me too. And for some of you, hopefully many of you, it will give you a moment of insight, entertainment, but inspiration and practical understanding of what really matters in life in these times where we've got time to really look at ourselves and really come in contact with what we truly need, not just all the things we want, but what we really need as human beings. So with that small introduction, I'm going to read this to you, but I'm going to share screen. And for those of you who like to read, you can read it along with me and we'll take it from there. Okay, so here's my contribution to this wonderful time that we're getting to spend really looking at ourselves in 2020 while the virus does its thing. And we take advantage of it to restructure the whole nature of our lives and our society. So it's book one of a series that I've called Legends of the Darkness. And book one is Dawn of the Darkness. And chapter one starts off in a part of the Arthurian legend, not recorded. This is my own understanding of it, put down, but as a novel, as an experience. And it shows one of the most important things that we really need to address now, which is courage. So chapter one, and I'm going to be relaxed with this, and if I make a mistake and I have to pause, don't worry about it. It's something to enjoy. So chapter one, silence reigned. Her mind stopped its endless musing, held in awe by the beauty she felt within. She found a quiet more still than the deepest silence. She felt relief, at home, at peace. Then her mind became restless. Afraid of drowning in the silence, it thought of the first thing it could, the drama around her. In reflection, the noise of the battle raged. She did not move, except to relax a little more. Her mind, realising it had to do better, went deeper. It needed something noble and engaging. Seduction with inspiration was plan B. The silence did nothing, went nowhere. It didn't need to. It was within everything and everywhere. The beautiful silence became her mentor. Her mind became a student, and together they sought new possibilities. Then, in an unforeseen moment of insight, she found the solution that set her in motion. Morgaine moved silently between Arthur's bodyguards to whisper in his ear. A smile emerged from his youthful concern. "You always push my limits, dear sister," he said, expressing both fear and excitement. Then he took command. "Who is ready to make a mistake so victory can be ours?" After half a dozen battles and victories, Arthur's knights had begun to trust him. Yet again, he came up with an idea that made them question the art of war and themselves. They hesitated, uncertain how to act, until Colin spoke up. "This is for me." Surprise flashed across many of their faces. Colin was known for his reserve, but there he stood, bold and vulnerable, ready to do whatever his king commanded. "Come with me," the young Arthur said without reservation, recognising the young knight's courage. "The rest of you and my bodyguards reinforce the flanks. No matter what happens, I want us strong enough to meet the challenge that will come there." Everyone except Morgaine looked at each other in surprise. Then they said with their eyes, "Here we go again," and got to it. "Morgaine, let Merlin know what is happening and support him if he needs you," Arthur said as he departed. Morgaine moved away and then swiftly up and around the ridge overlooking the battlefield. She reached a break in the trees where Merlin stood exposed to the elements and in touch with the elementals. Her sense of wonder in his presence never faded. In fact, she noted as she moved swiftly to him, it only increased. He made it easy to be present. It felt so right to be true to herself when she was with him. "What's up, Morgaine, girl?" Merlin said in High Druidic. "Oh, come on now, Grandpa," the two children said as one. "Now we know you are making this up." Okay, that's not High Druidic," their grandpa said, as their grandma smiled wickedly at him. Her love and desire for him glowed with the deep warmth of age and knowing. But that's in essence what Merlin said. And no, I'm not making this up. It really happened, in legend. "So shall I continue?" he asked. "Of course, Grandpa," Alan laughed. "As if we could stop you," said Elwyn, the elder of the two by a year. "I challenged Arthur to find his true centre," Morgaine explained. "You know what he's like. Let's make this magic spiritual stuff work in the real world. This should be interesting." Merlin looked at her and said, "Many men are not going to like you if you keep that up, young woman. Are you willing to take the negativity and the fear they will put your way?" "They're not the men I'm looking for or interested in," she replied boldly. "I was there when one of them, disguised as my father, raped my mother. His self-loathing and desperation for love gave him away. Yet the result was my half-brother, Arthur. With your help, Arthur rose above all that. I see what is possible for men to be. That I will always cherish and empower. I can't help it, Merlin. I love men. If that frightens men, they need to deal with it. Merlin absorbed her words like inspired music. He turned to the battle below and unleashed the power behind her words into the centre of the conflict. The airs over the battlefield that were still during the morning's posturing and clashes now stirred into life. The trees on the ridge and around the open fields swayed. They began to whisper in the fresh wind, creating a low roar like a restless ocean. It signalled change. Those not fighting for their life paused, sensing the shift. The front ranks of the warlord Alfred held a straight line. They did not move as the centre of Arthur's line fell back, appearing to be in disarray and retreat. The flanks of Arthur's troops held their ground, creating a front line in the shape of a crescent moon. Alfred, a brute of a man in appearance and character, was no fool. He would not let his men charge forward into a classic trap. They held their line, hurling spears at the flanks, arrows at the centre, and violent insults at anyone before them. These men had grown up under Alfred's brutal rule, and it showed. Fear and survival were their discipline, and rage was their defence. They held their line as the fresh wind blew their insults back into their faces and their spears and arrows off course. Frustration combined with the after effects of a cold night to send a chill through their rage that sapped its power. The winds reminded them of something deep and primal that was lost, a power they no longer had access to, yet secretly longed for. They paused where they stood, not knowing what was coming next. A young knight rode to the centre of Arthur's soldiers. Quiet, yet with perfect balance and poise, he commanded attention. He did not evoke fear, he evoked harmony. He was elegant and seemed out of place on this brutal killing field. As he stopped in the centre, the wind ceased, and one spell was broken by another. Like high theatre played before pigs, Alfred's men could only grunt in amazement. Being men used to living with fear, their mood turned into nervous laughter and then to shouts of derision, making fun of the elegant knight. The intense focus of Alfred's men broke with their laughter and name-calling. Where do they learn such foul language, Morgane said to Merlin as they watched. Without breaking his focus on the unfolding drama, Merlin whispered, when seeking relief from life in the sewers of fear. Colin looked with disdain across the battlefield, apparently unmoved. The taunts grew bolder and wilder, questioning the depth of his character and everything you can imagine and more about his sexuality. Then it appeared one insult hit the mark. A soldier shouted, "You are a coward." Colin responded with decisive passion. "I'll show you what it is to be a coward, you dog," Colin shouted as he charged forward, like an arrow unleashed from the distant centre of Arthur's army. Alfred grinned with cruel joy. "Young fool," he said, "we've got them now. Hold their charge and force their edges inwards. Force their flanks inwards and crush them," he roared to his commanders. Following Colin, Arthur's front ranks surged forward from the centre of the crescent. To the left and right of the centre, they moved forward in what would later be called a Mexican wave. The front half of Arthur's troops flowed into an arrowhead formation with brutally curved edges. The back half waited a moment, then moved sideways, forming into two separate groups at 45 degrees to the battlefront. Behind the frontal charge and between the two separating groups rode Arthur at the centre of his moving army. Arthur drew and raised Excalibur, a fairy-crafted sword, a gift of Nimue, fairy queen and lady of the lake, a sword enchanted for success. All the light and energy of the day was drawn to Arthur, embracing him and revealing his true charisma. At these moments, all who saw him recognised his right to rule. Now he was the conductor in a deadly ballet. The first wave, spearheaded by Colin, smashed into the front ranks of Alfred's troops. With the time and space they had to gather momentum, the impact was devastating. It rippled back into the supporting ranks like an earthquake, breaking down the internal structure of their wall. Then it spread along the front line in either direction as the curved edges of the arrowhead cut into the front line troops. As Alfred's troops on the flanks were already moving outwards, the impact pushed the battle into their sides and backs. They had to stop and push back to hold position. Unable to resist the impact, Alfred's troops were shaken and off balance. The two back sections of Arthur's force, reinforced with his knights, moved with purpose. They moved swiftly to the edges of the battle, lined up at 45 degrees, facing into Alfred's front line, and hit the enemy hard. Alfred's superior numbers were no help. They got in each other's way, and as they were pushed inwards from two sides, only the space between them offered the option to flee. And that's what they started to do. Only the space behind them offered the option to flee, and that's what they started to do. All those years of living in fear had taught them well. How to deal with bullies, Merlin said. Face the intimidation, and when he's cocky, a solid punch to the guts. Or lower, Morgaine interrupted. Men are strong, but they are brittle. Then smack him hard with your open hands on both ears and down he goes. Not exactly high magic, but very effective, Merlin concluded. Alfred did not flee. His sense of shock and shame was too intense to face. So he did what he'd always done, attack the problem by changing the rules. Arthur, he screamed over the noise of the battle. Boy, face me like a man, one-on-one. Arthur paused and looked across the battlefield at Alfred. Then, with a movement of Excalibur, he cut horizontally over the head of his mount and commanded, cease the slaughter for now. Hold your ranks and let's see what truth Alfred stands for. The din and chaos ceased so rapidly that those fleeing from the field slowed down. The sudden silence combined with the tension between the two leaders to draw them back. They could feel something authentic was about to be revealed. It pulled them like swimmers drawn into a whirlpool. The groans of the wounded and the cawing of the crows added dark shadow to the intensity of the moment. Everyone could feel the silent clash of two worlds. The world of fear was ready to do whatever it could to survive. No one, with the exception of Merlin, had any idea how the world of hope would respond to this challenge. Here was a reality check. 2 kings, one born out of scarcity and despair, the other conceived in violent deceit, yet raised with care, faced each other in single combat. What are these 2 worlds, Grandpa? Said Elwyn and Ellen, speaking with one mind, as they often did when totally absorbed in something. Well, Alfred saw life as survival of the fittest. He lived to conquer, replied Angus. And Arthur? Asked Ellen. Merlin taught Arthur to see life as a gift. To Arthur, life was about discovery. Still don't get it, said Elwyn. Okay, Alfred didn't care about himself or anyone else. He just wanted to get what he wanted. Arthur knew every moment, every person, everything mattered. He was raised by Merlin and his foster parents to learn from every experience. Arthur knew how to care, and this gave him power. Listen and you'll see. Arthur rode forward, as did Alfred. The ranks of warriors moved aside. Arthur's bodyguards rode up, swords drawn and spears aimed at Alfred. Arthur's archers scanned the battlefield on the lookout for treachery. Arthur waited, allowing the confusion to settle. He was in no hurry to engage. Alfred never let his stare or his hate for Arthur waver. His intent was deadly, and this alone had devastated many who stood against him. His presence drew darkness to him, speaking wordlessly of fearful magic and demons. Then out of the blue, Arthur asked, "How do you do that? Looking that fearful is quite a skill." Alfred hesitated for just a moment, and Arthur took the lead. Rather than the beauty and power of Excalibur clashing with Alfred's massive blade, Arthur engaged Alfred's mind. "You master fear or are crushed by it, boy, as you will learn," growled Arthur, baring his teeth. "I've learned from fear, but it has not possessed me," replied Arthur. "Then you will suffer, little man." "What more will that give me than what you have experienced, Alfred? I will not take your life for something so meaningless and unsatisfying." "You think you can take my life?" laughed Alfred. "I know I can," said Arthur, calmly looking into the eyes of Alfred. "Fear has already stolen your life, Alfred. Your life is for sale to anyone who can pay fear's price." "And what price is that?" Alfred scolded. "Transformation," replied Arthur. "Fear does not want to be mastered. If you try to master your fear will master you. Fear wants to be transformed." At that moment, all the fear deep within Alfred erupted. Without thinking, he kicked his horse into motion, moving close enough to strike. Arthur watched calmly. Alfred lifted his massive sword and swung hard, down and across at Arthur's body. The swing was powerful and broad, so whatever it hit, man or horse, would be cut in half. Alfred brought Excalibur smoothly upwards to meet the blow. Those watching expected Excalibur to be smashed down and Arthur killed. As the 2 blades met, the fairy wrought metals of Excalibur instantly absorbed the power of Alfred's blow and released it as pure sound that was alien and mysteriously beautiful. Alfred's sword resonated from tip to grip and disintegrated into shards that dissolved into the air. As his empty sword arm fell downwards in front of Arthur's body, Alfred nearly fell off his horse into the mud. The impression was that Alfred rode forward and gave the most exaggerated bow to Arthur, while Arthur raised his sword in victory. Arthur calmly watching Alfred struggle to calm his horse and regain his seat. Arthur sat calmly, watching Alfred struggle to calm his horse and regain his seat. Glaring at Arthur, Alfred raised his fist to strike. Looking straight into his eyes, Arthur said clearly, "I can just as easily take your arm. It's your decision." At that moment, something broke in Alfred's being, and like the shadow of a fast-moving cloud, fled the battlefield. Alfred slumped in confusion, yelling, "What just happened?" You, my new friend, like the rest of us today, have discovered courage. It may make more sense to you when you have fully recovered yourself. Till then, we need to keep you out of trouble. Take the king into custody and keep him secure but well, Arthur ordered. All those who surrender now will be spared and return to their homes. Those who run or continue to fight will be granted their wish to die. The terror and chaos ends today for all in this kingdom. On the ridge, Morgane smiled at Merlin. "You're quite the teacher, Merlin," she said. "He's quite the student," Merlin replied. So that's the end of chapter 1. And if you enjoyed that, let me know, contact me via email or wherever you got this. And, because I'm happy to keep going. I love this story, and because it came out of my heart. It came out of who I truly am. And now's the time for us to discover, all of us, including me, how to tell the story we were born to tell, the story that only you and I can tell, that we can tell individually. So I hope you enjoyed that and it brought some joy, inspiration, practical insight to your life. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.